Oh, yes, I. Good morning, Professor Linda Kaye. Thank you a lot to stay here with me to this interview and in this sharing of knowledge and to understand a little about your journey and about cyber psychology that will help us a lot. I really, really appreciate your presence here because I'm talking with Professor Linda Kaye, that she is a distinguished academic cyber psychology in Edge Hill University in UK, and she serves as associate head of psychology department. She is specialized in understanding online behavior and the effects on the mental health, the social identity, and the well-being of the humans nowadays using the technology. So I think that we will receive really, really good informations about what you are bringing to us. And please let me know, Professor Linda Kaye, at the beginning, how could you tell us a little about your journey. Did you choose psychology and how the cyber psychology became or become, sorry, your main area of expertise?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for inviting me for a chat today. It's always nice to be able to sort of share experiences and things. So it's always nice to be here. Yes, so I sort of fell into psychology actually, and also cyber psychology. I just enjoyed studying it at school. I did my A levels. So that was sort of between 16 and 18 years old. And psychology was one of the topics or one of the subject areas I picked. And I just really enjoyed it. So decided I wanted to continue doing it at university level. Um, and I think one of the things I liked about psychology was that it brought two kind of aspects of me together. So I really enjoyed science. I did scientific subjects at school as well, and I really like that aspect. And of course, psychology has a lot of science in it. It is a scientific subject. But also, one of the good things about psychology is it also is about people and it's about communication and being able to kind of help people. So that was the first time I'd studied a subject that kind of encompassed those two things, the sort of science and the kind of people sort of thing. So I just really like that about psychology. And I think the more I've had a career in psychology, the more I've realized how special that is actually, because there's not many subjects that have those two components and sort of are so complementary. Um, so I really like that. So yeah, so I did when I was in my final year of doing my undergraduate degree in psychology. I knew I wanted to do further study, so postgraduate degree, because I just really enjoyed studying, and I kind of had the idea that I quite like the idea of doing lecturing. I always enjoyed doing presentations and things when most people hate doing them, so I was a bit weird. And I thought actually I used to do coaching as well in sports, so I liked the idea of empowering and transforming people's lives. So to do lecturing in the UK, you have to have a PhD to do that. So it was the next logical step for me to do a PhD in psychology, which I did. And the reason I fell into cyber psychology was that it was just based on the topic I'd chosen for my PhD. So there's somebody in the department that I worked in prior to doing my PhD, because I worked as a graduate teaching assistant the year after I'd graduated. And there just happened to be somebody in the department at that time who was doing the topic of video games, the psychology of video gaming. And I thought that was really intriguing as an area. And I'd started to do a bit of reading around the area and realized there were lots of questions that haven't really been answered properly or not sufficiently. So it gave me an idea for a PhD proposal. I'll talk more about the processes of applying for PhDs and things later if you want more information on that. And then that I just kind of fell into it and then realized cyber psychology was a kind of thing when I started going to conferences while I was doing my PhD. So I kind of fell both into psychology and cyber psychology actually in many ways. and I've never looked back since. So that's kind of my journey, I guess. Um, Happy to answer any more questions on aspects of that if you want to know more.
Yes, no, that's awesome. So, what really means the cyber psychology? What is cyber psychology?
So cyber psychology essentially is about understanding what the intersection is of humans with new technologies and the internet. So it's sort of looking at human behavior through the lens of how that might operate when we are sort of digitally connected. So I kind of like to describe it as being the study of the digitally connected human experience. And because essentially I think that's what it boils down to. So it's I sort of it kind of acknowledges the fact that human behavior might actually look a bit different or might be impacted differently when we are digitally connected, whether that's in online spaces, whether that's mediated by online spaces, whether that's to do with the behaviors we engage in to actually interact with technology itself. So it can encompass a lot of things. It's quite a broad area. I suppose generally the three main kind of themes that you kind of look at in cyber psychology is why we engage, the sort of motivations for engaging in using technology or the internet. So, what kind of gratifications do we get from using it? The second main area or theme, I guess, is the actual nature of those interactions. So, what they actually look like. How are there any real world or offline equivalents of those behaviors? And what the nature of those is. So quite sort of conceptual, really, as a topic. And the third one is probably where a lot of the focus tends to be is what the impact of engaging in these spaces on things like mental health or behaviour, offline behaviour, things like that. So those tend to be the types of things we study in cyber psychology, and what it kind of is.
Yes, that's interesting. And am I right if I think that nowadays we can talk about cyber psychology as a new field, but will be the cyber psychology the future of the psychology? Uh, because we can see that everybody, all this youth is linked to the internet, is linked to devices. So it's like a reality that is augmented. So the way that unconscient and conscient, like a psychoanalyst, we are talking a lot about it,
Mm.
is a way that our borders were amplified with the technology. Could be or no. Psychology will be psychology and cyber psychology will be something added.
I think that's a really good question. I mean, some people would kind of I don't see them as separate. I kind of see cyber psychology as a lens to understand human behavior in the digital age. So I don't see it as kind of entirely separate discipline because I think you're right, actually, to understand psychology, actually, cyber psychology is psychology, actually, in this kind of this sort of digital age. So I think, there are wider discussions about where it sits. And certainly, I wouldn't talk about it as being completely separate or a discipline in itself. I'd see it as a sub discipline. But I guess as cyber psychology evolves more and more, I think what we'll start to move towards is just psychology, and then what the kind of different aspects of that look like in relation to digital engagement and so on. I think there's part of the reason I think it's sort of slightly discussed separately at the moment is that there's certain areas of cyber psychology that perhaps don't really integrate that much with other some domains of psychology. So a lot of cyber psychology research tends to be related to social psychology issues about online relationships, how we understand each other, personality, impressions, that kind of thing, and perhaps less other areas of psychology. So yeah, I don't think it's infiltrated sort of equally across different areas of psychology yet. So that might be why it's sort of still sort of talked about quite separately.
Yes, interesting. And that's interesting because I think that the cyber psychology give us a new perspective of the understand the human behavior, yes, with the digital area, age. But how do you think that this field is will influence the work of clinical psychologists in UK, for example, because how the future psychologists have to understand a little about the cyber psychology, why they need it.
Yes, no, I think that's a really good question. So, I mean, I'm not a clinical psychologist myself, so I'm not talking about it as a practitioner, but from what I understand from people who I do know work within the clinical psychology field, the way it seems to be infiltrating particularly is about understanding things like social media use. So that tends to be where a big prominent focus is. So it changes their work in relation to drawing in insights about how social media is affecting and integrated into people's lives, and where there might be risks to things like well-being. So, things like as clinical psychologists, maybe understanding, how do we best understand social media use? How can, rather than sort of putting complete restrictions on just don't use social media. So the evidence from cyber psychology is really useful because if we know what's healthier social media behavior versus less healthy, then that evidence is helpful for clinical psychologists to then know what to advise or what to recommend if clients are experiencing effects that they associate with social media use. So that seems to be a prominent area where clinical psychologists can use insights. But I think generally, it's about use of digital tools and techniques and therapies and things as well. So there's lots of insights from cyber psychology about how effective web-based or app-based methods might be for issuing therapy or as a supplement to therapy sessions. So again, I think there's implications about how that's done effectively, how that's integrated as part of therapeutic practice. There's tons of mental health apps and digital apps for physical well-being. That the market is huge; it's very saturated. So again, the evidence about which tools are particularly beneficial, what the evidence base is for those, that's all useful insights that can potentially be useful in practice as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think the impacts of cyber psychology go beyond just clinical psychologists as well. And I think there's sort of consumer context where it's useful. I think there's forensic and criminology sort of context where it's
Yes.
useful, and other things as well. So yeah, it's quite far reaching, I think.
A lot, I imagine so. And one last question that is linked to my PhD, because
Yes.
I'm researching the changement of the human self linked to psychoanalysis when we are using some technological or technology to augmented human as an augmented human. So could be a chip implant like brain implant like Elon Musk are developing in the Neuralink, or other devices that is linked to the skin or the body to be augmented human. It's not linked to oh, if I lose an arm, I will use a bionic arm. No, it's to correct that to normal because we have not normal, but correct or get this arm, but to amplify the human capacities. It's linked like the transhumanisms that is like to be augmented, not post-humanism, that is like cyborg, something that is fusioned. No, it's transhumans because it's human that is amplified with some technologies. And like we have the glasses, like Apple Vision, that is only the beginning, is on the political area yet because it's
Yeah.
very grocery. Sorry, it's very rude yet, but will be developed to be a technology very well developed in very I think in 5 years or 6 years, we will have glasses to amplify the reality very, very good developed. So with when we are linked to technologies in our bodies or using some technologies like glasses, it's like the reality and the limits of the humanity, biological humanity is amplified. So that border will not be the same. So probably it could make some changes in our perception of human and our capacity to do things. In psychoanalysis, Freud wrote that our self is developed in the initial ages at the body. So the body is the mind. So when we amplify our body, our mind is being touched. And we have another author, that is the author that I'm based on, that Didier. He wrote the eye skin, en français, moi peau, eye skin. That myself is it's my skin and can amplify. So I already read the article of Miguel Nicolelis that made the experience with the monkey with four arms and digital arms that was making things only with the brain and a digital arm. And
Mhm.
when he took out the experiment, it's like the monkey was feeling the phantasm member. So I was losing the capacity. So what do you think about these amplified augmented humans and the way that is linked to cyberpsychology?
Yeah, that's it's fascinating. I think, it sounds like your PhD topic is really, really interesting. I think there's interesting angles there. I mean, you can think about it from a philosophical perspective about the mind body kind of thing. That's one angle. And certainly there's sort of interesting thoughts about that kind of um enrichment or elevation about understanding what that link between mind and body is, which of course tracks back to the very early kind of discussions about psychology. It came from philosophy. I think there's also implications thinking about it from a kind of grounded cognition perspective about the kind of sensory motorway that we kind of integrate our physical experiences with our understanding of the world. And again, if our kind of capabilities are increased, then maybe our kind of cognitive experiences are enriched and increased and might be different as well. So I think there's the kind of grounded or embodied cognition kind of perspective is sort of interesting there, where that cyber psychology might intersect and help us understand that maybe in a slightly different way or in a kind of from a different perspective. Um, I think there's also interesting things. So when you were talking about that kind of elevating or amplifying, sorry, that was the word you used. It made me think about the kind of technology extension and subtraction. So there's theoretical models in cyber psychology called sort of in technology integration model, which talks about it from the perspective of acceptance of technology, so why we use it. But it made me think about one of the factors of that being technology extension, so how it extends capabilities, or in some cases can subtract, and how that relates to um, our perceptions about why we use it or why we might not use it, and so our acceptance of whether it's integrated in our lives or not. Um, so yeah, I think there's that angle about the way we accept it, and if we, if so, I think that, yeah, that idea of how it amplifies feeds into a lot of different things about technology, like why we might decide that we want to use it and how we integrate it in our lives. Also, what our perception of the world is and whether our capabilities are extended or not. Also, from a, again, philosophical perspective, how it relates to our understanding of what that intersection of the mind and body is. It's something I've not really thought about until you asked that question. So I think there's a lot of really interesting insights um, that cyber psychology perspectives can kind of bring there. Um, yeah, fascinating. Thank you for asking that. I've not really pondered it before. So
We
it's given
we
me something to think about today.
Oh yes, we can talk more for a lot.
Yeah.
Professor Kaye, I'm incredibly grateful for your time and your insights today. This exchange is truly valuable for our students, and perhaps we can explore this collaboration further between our universities in the future very soon. Thank you a lot.
Oh, no, thank you for inviting me. It's been really nice to have a think about things I haven't thought about before, but also to chat with you. Thank you.